Welcome, and we're glad you tuned in to another edition of our True Disciples broadcast. And for the next 30 minutes, my goal as your host is to inspire you, to educate you, challenge you, and hopefully when it's all said and done, we're going to activate you into a greater confidence of taking your Christian faith and engaging your culture. My name is Dr. Kevin Baird. I am your host. I'm the lead pastor of Legacy Church in Charleston, South Carolina, as well as the executive director of the South Carolina Pastors Alliance. And we are a growing network here in South Carolina of pastors who have decided we're going to network together in order to help influence public policy issues with regards to faith, family, and freedom. And I'm so glad that you tuned in today and that you've been listening, hopefully, through the weeks. And we have a great program in store for you today. Before we get started, I want to mention to you again just a couple of quick contact points so that you can reach us if you would like to. You can reach us through our websites at legacychurchsc.org, as well as scpastorsalliance.net. You can go to the web and find out what we're all about, and these groups also sponsor us, with which we are most grateful. And perhaps as you're listening today, whether you're an individual, and we do have several individuals that are underwriting this program, or maybe a small business and you'd like to be mentioned because you're a Christian businessman and you understand the challenges that you're facing in the marketplace today with running your business with your Christian value system, you may want to underwrite a program like this. And if that be so, I would love to hear from you and get you plugged in, and we would love to mention you on this radio program. Of course, we're on every social media venue available, whether it be Facebook, Twitter. You can email us through both those websites as well. We would love to hear from you in the near future. I want to make just a couple quick announcements before I introduce to you our guest for our broadcast today. The first one is, many of you have asked, but Legacy Church has changed its location. We have recently left our decade-long location on Sam Rittenberg Avenue in the West Ashley area here in the Charleston region, and we have decided to overtake the Crown Plaza Hotel in the Tanger Outlet area, and we have already begun services there, and we've just invaded the place. The hotel recently went through an $18 million renovation, and we appreciate them doing that for us. Because it certainly has caused it to be just a wonderful worship venue. So if you're in the area, you're looking for a home church, you don't currently have one, we would give you an invitation. I'd love to meet you personally. I've done that already with so many people. I've just been encouraged by those who have listened to the program, have stopped by the church, and they have greeted me, and it's been great to make some new friends. Second announcement I'd love to give to you as well is for the South Carolina Pastors Alliance. On October the 17th, that's a Thursday, October 17th, and it's going to begin at 10 a.m. In Columbia, South Carolina. We're going to have our yearly summit meeting for pastors and Christian leaders. And so if you're a pastor, a staff pastor, Christian leader, maybe of a ministry that is out there, and you're wanting some inspiration, again, education, some tools that will help you activate and step into some public policy arenas. We're having a summit that Thursday, 10 o'clock in the morning, October the 17th, at Columbia World Outreach. That's a local church. It's not more than a few blocks from Williams-Brice Stadium. So if you've ever gone to a Carolina Gamecock football game, you will be very close to where this summit will be held. Pastor Mike Gonzalez of Columbia World Outreach will be hosting it. It's at 523 Superior Street there in Columbia, South Carolina. I would love to be able to see a great number of pastors. It's our largest meeting of the year. It's always exciting. We have some special speakers that will be coming in as well. It concludes at noon, so it's just 2 quick hours, but you'll be meeting some movers and shakers in South Carolina, as well as those that are concerned about pressing their Christian faith into the culture. And so hopefully you'll put that on your calendar and you'll meet with us on October the 17th. Well, today I have a special guest with me, and I'm just excited to have him with me. He's not only a a resident expert on some leadership issues, but he's a good friend as well. Our daughters are friends, and I wanted him to come in today in order to visit with me a little bit about leadership. And we mentioned on our last program, as we shared with you, that I believe that there are different mountains of influence in our culture. In fact, some have even taught there are 7 different mountains of influence in our culture, whether it be the religious mountain, family, education, business, the marketplace, media, like a radio broadcast, like what we're doing right now. There's influence to this. Arts and entertainment, Hollywood, and then politics and government. And so there are these mountains of influence that we're wanting Christian believers to step into and exercise leadership in all of these venues. And so my guest today is going to help us understand a little bit of what leadership is all about. And I want to introduce to you our guest, Mr. Doug Dickerson. Doug, thank you so much for being with us on the True Disciple broadcast.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much. I am thrilled and delighted to be here and share this time with you and your listeners, and appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Well, Doug, you are a leadership consultant as well as a motivational speaker in this area of leadership. In fact, I was able to attend one of your meetings recently as you were sharing with those who are in the marketplace, business leaders. You're the director of Management Moment Leadership Services. You write leadership columns that are published internationally, and you've been recognized in several ways, as well as writing books on this area as well. And so you have some expertise in the area of leadership, which is why I wanted you to be here today. And so as we get started, why don't you just kind of personalize it and just tell our listeners, why leadership? Why did you get interested in this area, and why have you made it sort of your focus?
Well, I've always had a passion for leadership, I guess probably from the earliest times growing up. I am a student of history. I enjoy history. I've saturated myself in that for such a long time, and I love reading the biographies. And from an early age growing up, I've always been fascinated by current events, world events, and looking at those who govern and so forth. And leadership is just one of those areas where, and growing up in church has been a fascinating topic for me. And so when I went to Southeastern University down in Lakeland, Florida, one of the classes that I took, of course, was hermeneutics, but yet also I studied leadership in several of the courses, organizational behavior and leadership. And one of the great influences at that time in my life was one of the professors here, a retired Army officer, Dr. Wilson, who has such a phenomenal impact on my life and just really opened my eyes and understanding to the concepts of leadership. And so I would say from those experiences growing up, just, saturating myself as a student of history and events that are going on in the world and looking at it from the prism of biblical context. And my experiences, in college, at the university, and studying that really just kind of launched and opened up my eyes and understanding to leadership and wanting to learn more about it. So for all of these years, I've been a student of leadership. I kind of cringe when I hear people say they're leadership experts, because I think that's just a continual process of learning that we all go through. And I don't know that any of us really ever arrive, but along the way, we pick up nuggets of things that we've learned through experience, through the School of Hard Knocks, whatever the case may be, that help us shape and formulate our view of leadership. And so what is leadership? Well, I think one of the simplest definitions of leadership was provided by John Maxwell, who said that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So I take that definition of leadership and say, well, how does that cross into my belief system in terms of being a Christian, being a believer? How does that translate? And so, if it's influence, to what degree, to what extent are we using that influence that we have as believers, as Christians, to impact our world, our culture, and what's happening around us? You talk about those mountains and the marketplace and all the different arenas that are important to us. And these are pertinent questions, and I think that as Christians, as believers, we need to be addressing.
Excellent. Leadership, and I have thoughts. I've not studied it. I've read at least one of your books. I know you have a couple of them out there, as well as some of your blog writings as well. And leadership is of interest to me. I've not spent as much time in this area, but as I've engaged certain arenas of life, I've found out that there's just a desperate need for leadership. And you defined it as influence, and the mountains are here as well. And we're zeroing in on how we bring Christian leadership to these areas, so our faith can find a place of influence, because ultimately we're wanting to reach people for the gospel. So are there some first steps we can begin to take to exercise leadership? Or what if you don't feel like a leader? How do you start this journey?
Well, let me answer that second part first, because I think sometimes the misconception about leadership is that somehow or another I have to have a title, I have to have a position, or we tie it to some kind of external factor that really has nothing to do with it. So let me bring it back to this. We talk about leadership, and we talk about Christian leadership or servant leadership. That's a very popular term that I subscribe to. But if we're going to engage the marketplace, if we're going to engage the world, make an impact on our culture, there are a few things I think we should take into consideration, especially as we define what Christian leadership is versus any other type of leadership. Okay. So, and I think it runs kind of parallel tracks, if you will, Kevin, from this standpoint. Dual tracks, if you will, the Christian life and Christian leadership. Okay. So let me try to explain it this way. When they approached Jesus and they asked him to sum up what is the greatest commandment. Okay. You have the 10 commandments, you have all the stuff that the Pharisees added to it, but they asked him, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus' reply was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. I like that. Jesus just boiled it down to the simplest form, and I like that because I'm a simple person. And so he says, love God with all your heart and love others. Okay, so we get that. I could wrap my mind, I could wrap my heart around that concept, that idea that Jesus gave to us. But also from a Christian leadership point of view, I think it follows a similar track. And first of all, it goes back to, and it's twofold, I believe. One is what Jesus said first: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, because everything flows out of our relationship to God. So in other words, how I interact with others, how I treat my neighbor, how I treat my family, all of these different things flows out of my relationship to God. And so if I'm going to be an effective leader, if I'm going to be an effective Christian leader, it flows out of a relationship with God first. Secondly, it is pretty much the same as what Jesus, his response was, and that was to love your neighbor as yourself. I think the additional thought there would be to serve. So we tie it into, first of all, our relationship to God, and secondly, we tie it into how can I, out of my relationship to God, relate to other people, serve other people, and exert influence in a way that's going to impact culture. So this is what we're going back to. My relationship with God comes first, and secondly, using that relationship in a way that makes a difference in the lives of other people, not just in the church arena or, in the church, but in the world, in that marketplace, as we talk about business and other areas where God has planted us to use it for his kingdom and use it for his glory.
That's excellent. And to break out of the four walls, our leadership out of the four walls of church life, and begin to exercise leadership on this mountain life. Right. Anyway, we're visiting today with Doug Dickerson, who is the director of the Management Moment Leadership Services, and he's sharing with us here on the True Disciple broadcast today, and we're talking about the concept of Christian leadership. What's interesting to me, Doug, when it comes to leadership, and there's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of books that are written on this subject. A lot of it has to do with corporate life and bringing leadership to corporations. But I always thought it interesting how one brings leadership to people when you're writing their paycheck, and how perhaps in a volunteer organization and just being in life, and you're trying to exercise influence as we've defined leadership here, that there's a little bit of a difference as to how leadership comes. It's easy to say someone, hey, do this because I'm writing your check, where you ask someone to, hey, come follow me because this is a cause that's important.
Right. Well, and that's such a huge distinctive. And I think one of the reasons why that is because, you have in the marketplace, in the workplace, on the job, whatever, you have a certain degree of leverage that you can exert. And I think a big part of that is a paycheck. Okay. So obviously there's a reason to be motivated to do what you're supposed to do and or expected to do as it relates to your job, your performance in the marketplace and the workplace. And I think, it's been said that if you can lead a group of volunteers, you can lead anybody. So especially in the church world, the leadership style and approach is so, perhaps somewhat different in terms of how you relate to people, but because you are dealing with volunteers for the most part that you're dependent upon to move the ministry forward. So that's important. But, it's all relational at the end of the day, whether you're talking about something that's taking place in the church, the body of Christ, or you're talking about something that's taking place in the conference room, in corporate America, wherever that place might be. Relationships is key. And I don't think on any level that can be understated in terms of importance in how you go about each day executing leadership in a way that makes a difference and is productive and gets the job done and brings glory to God in the process.
I've often said, and it may sound a little self-serving at the moment, but I think generally pastors are some of the greatest leaders and can be some of the greatest leaders because they don't have the point of leverage of paying people to show up every Sunday, to participate in this ministry, to help in this regard. I mean, it's totally based on pure influence.
Right. And I think that is one of the reasons why you see your hand is forced in terms of being a pastor. In a lot of respects, your hand is forced in terms of developing leadership skills and tact and the things that you need to do to lead your congregation, to speak the truth in love, to do the things that you have to do to bring correction, to bring rebuke, to, fulfill the full counsel of God. It's a little bit different than, very much different from what you see in the corporate world. So, but I think in a lot of ways, leaders in church, especially, you earn your stripes a lot quicker and you have to develop it a lot sooner in your life, perhaps, and you might otherwise have to do it. And that's not to say that your leadership style and approach and the way you go about conducting yourself as a leader in the corporate side is not important or relevant. But in the church world, it is so critically important the way that you deal with people. And, some people, as you well know, all you have to do is say, this is what we're going to do. And they're like, Pastor Kevin, we're behind you. Let's go do it. And others that require the strokes. And, they require a lot more time and attention than other people. And that's just part of it. And so you have to wear many hats and you have to know when to change them and how to do it and so forth. So it could be walking the tightrope, so to speak, but it's all good, though.
Well, I know there are people who are listening today who probably have never considered themselves a leader or a leader type. I want you just to talk for a minute about, different leadership, whether it's style. Is it birthed out of a style or is it birthed out of a personality? Or, I've been friends with you, for some time now, and you and I have different personalities, obviously, and we probably approach things different ways. But that doesn't mean that one leadership style necessarily is better. It certainly is different. So I'm just trying to encourage people who are out there that may not be my personality type, and because I'm more confrontational at times, but they may not personality-wise be that way, yet they still are under command by our Lord to bring leadership, to be salt and light wherever they are, which I think is perhaps another great definition of leadership. Talk about that.
Well, it's such a great question, and I think God made each one of us different, and we all have different styles and personalities, and that's what God uses. Okay. He's not trying to clone everybody to be the same. We're all different. our personality styles are different, our approach is different, but that's what God uses. And so, for those out there that might say, well, I have to have this quality, that quality. When I look at styles of leadership, there are several different styles, obviously, of leadership that are out there, and we've all been exposed to different types. Some of the basic leadership styles, for example, would be the coercive leader. These are the ones that just pretty much force you to do what, tell you this is the way it is, and there's, that's it, take it or leave it. It's the highway, my way or the highway approach.
Kind of the dictator
type, or it might be the authoritative type, is all about taking control. And that means, that leader has a clear vision of communication with the group, and this is it. And or, you might just simply have the pace setter, that one that is, just keeping everybody on track doing. But I really think it comes down to, I am the way that I am because that's the way God made me. And you are the way that you are because that's the way God made you. And it's so I think a lot of it is simply acknowledging I am who I am because this is the way God made me and created me. But yet also from a Christian leadership perspective, being, submitted to God, submitted to those in authority over us, as the scripture commands, but lead out of humility and lead with humility and with that servant's heart in mind. But yet also, we don't hear a lot today about followership. I was talking with someone just the other day about this particular topic. We don't have a lot of teaching on that. We don't hear a lot about that. And I think sometimes the caution there is, you're going to go into something that is not biblical or cultish or whatever the case may be. But really, the joy, getting back to that, but the joy of serving, the joy of following Christ, and the joy of serving God with the gifts and passions that we have. And so, it's not about a title. It's not about position or anything like that. That can trip us up at times if we're not careful. But I think it comes back to simply recognizing the fact that if we will submit ourselves to God, going back to what we opened with, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, and serving him out of a joyful heart and in humility.
Well, we've been talking with Doug Dickerson, who is the Director of Management Moment Leadership Services, on the subject of leadership, and doing our best to encourage you that are listening that wherever God has placed you, wherever your footsteps have been led to, that in all likelihood there is a mandate from Him to exercise influence somehow, some way in that area. And if you're influencing, then that means you are a leader. Doug, I know you teach this. You have hours of teaching on this. I've watched you teach in church setting as well as a corporate or business setting. If people have interest in knowing more or having some input from you in this area, is there a way they can contact you?
Absolutely. First of all, go to my website. That's that's the place to go, www.dougsmanagementmoment.blogspot.com. And everything is there. I write a weekly column that's posted to that site. I have another site that's daily inspiration, daily leadership thoughts. But www.dougsmanagementmoment.blogspot.com.
And let's be clear, you're available to input and resource churches with regards to leadership as well as businesses. I've watched companies bring their employees to get some ongoing training in this area.
Absolutely. Available for speaking for your business, for your church, men's group, whatever the case may be, that you would like to have some leadership development training workshops. I am available for you to do that.
Hey, I only got about 2 minutes before I have to go into my wrap-up on this program, but why not just real quickly, why don't you tell me in history, I may save next time biblically, but in history, who are some of your favorite leaders? Just give us a few.
Oh, wow. Well, a couple of them. I think one of my favorites in history is certainly Winston Churchill. I think, was certainly one of my favorites, just simply because of the tremendous struggle that he led his country through and the leadership that he provided for the people, not just of England, but the world during that time. And leading the people through that turbulent time in our world history. Churchill's one of my favorites, and I've always enjoyed studying him. But I look down through political, not just that, but I look at Reagan, one of my favorite presidents, of course, and the leadership that he brought to our country at a critical time is really significant, and I don't think can be understated in terms of what he brought to the table for our country at a critical time.
Well, excellent. Well, we look forward to holding you over and continuing this discussion next week on leadership, because it's vitally important. In fact, next week I think we're going to probably open the can with regards to character issues and why so many leaders find themselves in ditches. And it's not just church or spiritual leadership, but it is across the spectrum in our political circles as well as corporate circles. There's a tendency for leaders to forget that their influence is really a sacred trust. So, Doug, thanks for being with us today on the True Disciples broadcast. I look forward to visiting with you next week as well.
It's my pleasure. I thank you so much for having me on the program.
And I want to remind all of you that are listening to us today that we would love to hear from you. And again, if you'd love to sponsor this program, I would most definitely want to talk to you. And you can go to our websites, legacychurchsc.org, scpastorsalliance.net. Both of those websites will give you ways to get in contact with us. And if you would like to catch up on any past programs, or if you'd like to direct one of your friends to this program, we're real good at getting these things posted quickly through our legacy media. And you can go to iTunes or to YouTube, and both of those media venues are there for you to catch up as well. Hey, I just want to remind you, Legacy Church has moved to a new location. We are no longer at the Sam Rittenberg address, but because to move forward, we just felt like it was time to release the leased situation we were in. And gratefully, God provided a wonderful person in our congregation who was attached to the Crown Plaza Hotel in the Tanger Outlet area. Don't let that in any way, shape, or form sound to you like there isn't a happening going on. We fill that place on a Sunday morning, and there are things for all of your children, nursery. It's well-staffed, it's safe, and we want you to come out and visit us and be a part of it every Sunday. That starts at 10 a.m. in the morning. And to just mention to you one last time, because we want you to mention it to your pastor, or if you're a Christian leader of a ministry, that you might be there as well, that we have on October the 17th, on a Thursday, the South Carolina Pastors Alliance is having their great summit. We have some special speakers we'll be mentioning to you in the future. It will be held at the Columbia World Outreach. It's a church. Pastor Mike Gonzalez, a great brother in the Lord, is hosting it. It's at 523 Superior Street in Columbia. Mark your calendar, October the 17th. That's a Thursday, beginning at 10 o'clock, and it'll be 2 hours of fast-paced encouragement, education, inspiration, and we're going to give you some great activation points as well. Well, we thank you again for tuning in to our radio broadcast here at the True Disciples Network. We appreciate that very much. And as always, when we sign off, we remind you, we want you to keep walking the walk, because it's so important to live the values you espouse. And we encourage you, as you're listening, to keep being a true disciple. Until next week, this is Pastor Kevin Baird from Legacy Church saying, God bless you and have a great week.